When I opened my eyes after 18 months in a coma, I expected to see Tyler's face filled with relief and tears of joy. Instead, I found myself staring at a wedding announcement pinned to my hospital room bulletin board. Tyler Brooks and Vanessa Kane, married 3 weeks ago at Riverside Manor. The woman in the white dress was radiant, glowing with happiness as she kissed my husband under an arch of white roses. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What Tyler didn't know was that his new wife had been stealing from his business accounts for months, and I had the proof locked away in a safety deposit box he'd forgotten I had access to. What Vanessa didn't know was that our marriage was never legally dissolved, making her an unwitting participant in bigamy. But the biggest surprise of all was what I discovered about the night of my accident, and how it would bring both their carefully constructed lies crashing down. The fluorescent lights above my hospital bed buzzed with an irritating frequency that somehow felt both foreign and familiar. My throat was raw, my voice nothing more than a scratchy whisper when I tried to call for a nurse. The calendar on the wall read March 15th, 2024. The last date I remembered was September 3rd, 2022. 18 months of my life had simply vanished, erased by what the medical charts at the foot of my bed called a traumatic brain injury sustained in a motor vehicle accident. Dr. Rachel Martinez found me sitting up in bed, staring at that wedding announcement with trembling hands. Rachel had been my college roommate before she became one of Cedar Falls' most respected neurologists, and the relief in her dark eyes when she saw me awake was genuine and overwhelming. She rushed to my bedside, her professional composure cracking as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Amanda, thank God," she whispered, taking my hand in both of hers. "We weren't sure you'd ever wake up. Your brain activity had been so minimal for the past 6 months that we'd started discussing long-term care options." I held up the wedding announcement, my voice barely audible. "Rachel, what is this? When did Tyler get married?" The color drained from her face. She glanced toward the door, then back at me, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. "Amanda, there's so much you need to know. Tyler, he claimed that you had expressed wishes about not wanting to be kept on life support indefinitely. He said you discussed it after your mother passed away from her long illness." That was a lie. My mother had died peacefully in her sleep from natural causes when I was in college. Tyler and I had never had any such conversation because there had never been a reason to have one. I tried to sit up straighter, ignoring the dizziness that threatened to overwhelm me. "Where is he? Where's my husband?" Rachel's expression grew more troubled. "He's been living in the house you shared on Maple Street with his new wife. Amanda, he had you declared legally dead after 12 months. The marriage to Vanessa Kane is legitimate in the eyes of the law because your death certificate made him a widower." The words hit me like physical blows. Legally dead, widower, new wife living in my home. I thought about the garden I'd spent 3 years cultivating behind that house, the kitchen where I'd learned to make Tyler's grandmother's apple pie recipe, the bedroom where we'd planned our future together. Another woman was sleeping in my bed, cooking in my kitchen, probably complaining about the temperamental sprinkler system I'd never gotten around to fixing. "But I'm not dead," I said, the obvious statement feeling surreal as it left my lips. "No, you're very much alive, which creates a rather complicated legal situation." Rachel squeezed my hand. "Amanda, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully. Do you remember anything about the night of your accident?" I closed my eyes, trying to push through the fog that seemed to surround those final memories. Tyler and I had been arguing about something, but the details remained frustratingly out of reach. I remembered driving, but not where I was going or why I was alone. The headlights of an oncoming vehicle were the last clear image I could summon. "Fragments," I admitted. "We fought about something, but I can't remember what. I was driving somewhere at night." Rachel nodded slowly. "The police report said you were found on Highway 101, about 20 miles outside of town. Your car had gone off the road and hit a tree. They assumed you'd fallen asleep at the wheel. Something in her tone suggested there was more to the story, but before I could ask, a commotion in the hallway drew our attention. Raised voices, one of which I recognized despite the months of silence. Tyler was arguing with someone at the nurse's station. "I don't care what your visiting hours are," his familiar voice carried through the partially open door. "I received a call that there's been a development with my late wife's condition. I have every right to be here." Late wife. The casual way he referred to me as a past tense person made my stomach clench with a mixture of grief and rage. Rachel moved toward the door, clearly intending to intercept him, but I stopped her with a gesture. "Let him come in," I said. "I want to see his face when he realizes his dead wife is very much alive." Tyler Brooks entered my hospital room looking every inch the successful real estate developer he'd worked so hard to become. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit tailored to his athletic frame. He'd always been handsome in a conventional way, the kind of man who looked good in Christmas cards and at charity fundraisers. But something was different about him now. There was a hardness around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a calculating coldness that made him seem like a stranger wearing my husband's face. He stopped short when he saw me sitting up in bed, his confident stride faltering as the blood drained from his features. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We simply stared at each other across the sterile hospital room while machines beeped and hummed around us, marking the rhythm of my very much alive heartbeat. "Amanda," he finally whispered, and I heard genuine shock in his voice. Whatever reaction he'd been expecting when he came to the hospital, it wasn't this. "Hello, Tyler. You look well. Marriage seems to agree with you." He moved closer to the bed, his movements careful and deliberate, as if I were some kind of wild animal that might bolt at any sudden motion. "I can't believe you're awake. The doctors said the chances were so slim. We all thought—" "That I was dead?" "Yes. I heard about the death certificate. Quite presumptuous of you, don't you think?" Tyler glanced at Rachel, who was watching our interaction with undisguised interest. "Could we have a moment alone?" "No," Rachel said firmly. "Amanda has been through significant trauma. As her attending physician, I need to monitor her stress levels during any emotional encounters." I was grateful for Rachel's protective instincts, but I also needed to hear what Tyler had to say without the filter of professional medical supervision. "It's okay, Rachel. Just wait outside the door, please." She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll be right outside. If you need anything at all, just call out." When the door closed behind her, Tyler moved to the chair beside my bed and sat down heavily. Up close, I could see the signs of stress etched around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. This wasn't the confident man who had built Brooks & Associates into one of the most successful real estate firms in Cedar Falls. "Amanda, I need you to understand something. When you didn't wake up after 6 months, then 9 months, then a year, the doctors were saying there was almost no chance of recovery. Your brain scans showed minimal activity. I had to make impossible decisions about your care, about our finances, about our future." "Our future? Or your future with Vanessa Kane?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair. I mourned you. I grieved for the life we'd planned together. Vanessa helped me through the darkest period of my life." "How convenient. Tell me, when did this grieving widower find comfort in the arms of his secretary? Before or after you had me declared dead?" Tyler stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the hospital parking lot. "Vanessa wasn't my secretary when we met. She was handling the legal aspects of your estate. She was professional, compassionate, understanding. Our relationship developed naturally over time." I studied his profile as he stared out the window, noting the defensive set of his shoulders, the way he avoided eye contact when discussing his new wife. There were pieces of this story that didn't fit together, details that felt rehearsed rather than genuine. "Tell me about the night of my accident," I said quietly. Tyler turned from the window, his expression guarded. What do you want to know? You were in a car accident. These things happen. What were we fighting about? For just a moment, something flickered across his features. Fear, maybe, or recognition. I don't remember arguing. You went out to meet your sister Linda for dinner, but you never made it to the restaurant. That detail struck me as wrong, though I couldn't yet articulate why. Linda lived across town, and the restaurant where we usually met was in the opposite direction from where my car was found. Why would I have been on Highway 101, heading away from Cedar Falls rather than toward it? I'd like to see Linda, I said. Has she been to visit me during all this time? Of course, she was here constantly for the first few months, but as time went on, and it became clear that you weren't going to wake up, she had to get back to her own life. She has kids, Amanda. She couldn't put her entire existence on hold indefinitely. Something in his tone suggested criticism, as if my prolonged unconsciousness had been an inconvenience to everyone involved. I made a mental note to call Linda as soon as I was able, to get her version of events and understand what had really happened during those 18 months. Tyler moved back to the chair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees in a posture that was familiar from countless conversations during our marriage. Amanda, I know this is overwhelming, and I know you must have questions about everything that's happened. But I need you to understand that I've moved on. Vanessa and I, we've built a life together. We're legally married. But you were already married. To me. You were declared dead. In the eyes of the law, our marriage ended when you died. Except I didn't die. Tyler ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting its careful arrangement. This is going to be complicated. There will be legal implications, financial considerations, the house, the business, our joint accounts. Everything had to be settled as part of your estate. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. What happened to my things? My personal belongings? Most of them are in storage. Some of Vanessa's belongings are at the house now, but we kept your important items safe. Important items. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As if 18 years of accumulated memories and possessions could be reduced to a few boxes in a storage unit. I thought about my grandmother's jewelry, the photo albums chronicling our relationship, the collection of vintage books I'd been gathering since college. All of it apparently deemed unimportant enough to be packed away and forgotten. I want to see the house, I said. Tyler shook his head immediately. That's not a good idea. Vanessa doesn't know about this yet. She's going to need time to process the situation. Vanessa is going to need time? I'm the one who woke up to find her husband married to someone else. I'm the one whose entire life has been erased while I was unconscious. I understand you're upset, but you have to see this from her perspective too. She married a widower. She's been taking care of a man who lost his wife in a tragic accident. This isn't her fault. The way Tyler defended his new wife sparked something hot and angry in my chest. During our marriage, he'd never shown that kind of protective instinct toward me. If anything, he'd often criticized me for being too emotional, too reactive, too invested in situations that he felt were beneath his concern. Where is she now? I asked. At work. She manages the office at Brooks & Associates now. Of course. She did. Vanessa had stepped into my husband's life so completely that she was now running his business as well as sharing his bed. I wondered what other aspects of my existence she had claimed as her own. I want you to leave now, I said, suddenly exhausted by the conversation and the magnitude of everything I was learning. Tyler stood, straightening his tie in a gesture I remembered from our marriage. It was something he did when he felt he'd handled a difficult situation successfully. I'll call you in a few days once you've had time to process everything. We'll figure out how to handle this situation fairly for everyone involved. Everyone involved. as if I were just another complication in his business dealings rather than the wife he'd abandoned in a hospital bed. I watched him walk toward the door, noting the confidence that had returned to his stride now that the initial shock had worn off. "Tyler," I called out just as he reached for the door handle. He turned back, eyebrows raised expectantly. "There's something you should know. I may have been unconscious for 18 months, but that doesn't mean I was completely unaware of what was happening around me. Sometimes, when you're in a coma, you can hear things, conversations that people assume you'll never remember." It was a lie, but Tyler didn't know that. I watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of panic or recognition. What I saw was a flash of something that might have been fear before his expression smoothed back into practiced calm. "I don't know what you think you heard, Amanda, but coma patients don't retain memories of conversations. It's medically impossible." "Is it? I guess we'll find out." After Tyler left, Rachel returned with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. She settled into the chair Tyler had vacated and studied my face with the clinical attention I remembered from our college days when she was helping me through organic chemistry. "How are you feeling?" That was a lot of information to process. "Like I've woken up in someone else's life," I admitted. "Rachel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She nodded, her dark eyes serious. "Of course." "Was Tyler having an affair before my accident?" Rachel was quiet for a long moment, weighing her words carefully. "I don't have any proof of an affair, but there were things that seemed odd to me. He started asking very specific questions about your prognosis much earlier than most spouses do. Usually, families cling to hope for months or even years. Tyler was asking about legal death declarations and estate procedures within the first 6 months. What else? Vanessa Kane started appearing at the hospital as Tyler's emotional support around month 4. At first, she was just someone from his legal team helping with insurance paperwork. But by month 6, she was holding his hand in the waiting room and staying overnight when he couldn't. I absorbed this information, adding it to the growing list of details that painted a picture I didn't like. "Rachel, I need you to help me with something. I need to contact Linda without Tyler knowing about it. And I need to understand what really happened the night of my accident. Amanda, you should focus on your recovery right now. The rest of this can wait until you're stronger." "No, it can't wait. Tyler is already planning how to handle this situation fairly for everyone involved. I need to know what I'm dealing with before he has time to get ahead of me." Rachel stood and walked to the small whiteboard where the nursing staff tracked my vital signs and medication schedule. She erased the existing information and wrote a phone number in her neat handwriting. "Linda's current number. She's been worried sick about you, Amanda. She never stopped believing you'd wake up." I stared at the number, feeling the first genuine spark of hope I'd experienced since opening my eyes. If Linda had continued to believe in my recovery when everyone else had given up, maybe she'd also noticed things about Tyler's behavior that others had missed. "There's something else," Rachel said, returning to her chair. "Something I probably should have mentioned earlier, but I wanted you to get through that conversation with Tyler first." "What is it?" "Your accident. I've seen a lot of car crash injuries in my career, and something about yours never sat right with me. The police report said you hit a tree, but your injury pattern was more consistent with being struck by another vehicle." The room seemed to tilt slightly around me. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that either the police investigation was incomplete, or there were details about that night that never made it into the official report. Your head injury was severe, but it was focused on the right side of your skull in a way that suggested lateral impact rather than the forward collision described in the accident report. I tried to process this information alongside everything else I was learning, but my brain felt sluggish and overwhelmed. 18 months of unconsciousness, a husband who'd remarried after having me declared dead, and now the possibility that my accident wasn't really an accident at all. "I need to rest," I said, suddenly desperate for everyone to leave so I could think clearly. Rachel nodded, checking her watch. The nursing staff will want to run some cognitive tests with you later, today, and we'll need to discuss your physical therapy options. But for now, sleep is the best thing you can do. After she left, I stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to organize my thoughts. Tyler had moved on with suspicious speed, marrying a woman who had inserted herself into his life while I lay, unconscious. The circumstances of my accident were questionable at best, and somewhere in the fog of my missing memories was a fight significant enough to send me driving alone at night on a highway that led away from my intended destination. I reached for the phone beside my bed and dialed Linda's number, my fingers trembling as I pressed each digit. The phone rang 3 times before I heard my sister's familiar voice. "Hello? Linda? It's Amanda." The silence stretched so long that I began to worry the call had been disconnected. Then I heard a sharp intake of breath and the sound of something clattering to the floor. "Amanda? Oh my God, Amanda! Is it really you? Are you awake? Are you okay?" Hearing my sister's voice broke something loose inside me, and tears began streaming down my cheeks. "I'm awake, Linda. I'm at Cedar Falls General. Can you come see me?" "I'm already grabbing my keys. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't go anywhere." For the first time since waking up, I smiled. "I'm not going anywhere. I have a lot of questions for you." "I have answers," Linda said, and something in her tone suggested that our conversation was going to reveal even more complications in my already upended world. "Amanda, there are things about Tyler and that woman that you need to know. Things I couldn't prove while you were unconscious, but things that never felt right." After hanging up, I closed my eyes and tried to prepare myself for whatever revelations Linda was bringing with her. I'd already learned that my husband had remarried, and my accident might not have been accidental. I couldn't imagine what other surprises were waiting for me, but something told me that the wedding announcement pinned to my bulletin board was just the beginning of a much larger and more complicated story. Linda arrived at the hospital like a whirlwind of barely contained emotion, her auburn hair disheveled from running through the corridors, and her eyes red-rimmed from what I suspected were tears of relief. She was thinner than I remembered, with new lines around her eyes that spoke of months of worry and sleepless nights. When she saw me sitting up in bed, she stopped in the doorway as if afraid that moving too quickly might make me disappear again. "Amanda," she whispered, then rushed forward to wrap me in a hug that was fierce and desperate and exactly what I needed. She smelled like her familiar lavender perfume mixed with coffee and the faint scent of playground sand that always clung to her clothes from her job as an elementary school teacher. "I never stopped believing you'd come back," she said against my shoulder, her voice thick with tears. "Even when Tyler said we needed to accept that you were gone, even when the doctors started talking about long-term care facilities, I knew you were still in there somewhere." I held her tightly, feeling more grounded than I had since waking up. Linda had always been my anchor, the steady presence who helped me navigate life's complications. 5 years older than me, she'd stepped into a maternal role after our parents died, and her unwavering faith in my recovery was the first genuinely comforting thing I'd experienced in this strange new reality. "Tyler said you stopped visiting," I said when we finally pulled apart. Linda's expression darkened immediately. "That's a lie. I was here every single day for the first year. I read to you, played your favorite music, brought fresh flowers every week. I only started coming less frequently when Tyler banned me from your room." "He banned you? Why would he do that?" Linda settled into the visitor's chair, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. "Because I started asking too many questions about the night of your accident. Because I refused to accept his version of events. Because I caught him in several lies about what happened that evening." My heart began beating faster. "What kind of lies?" "For starters, he told everyone you were going to meet me for dinner at Romano's that night." "But Amanda, I was home with the kids. Jake had the flu, and I'd canceled our plans that afternoon. I called you around 4 o'clock to reschedule, and you said you understood completely. I tried to access that memory, to pull it from the fog that surrounded that final day, but it remained frustratingly out of reach. If I wasn't meeting you, where was I going? That's what I've been trying to figure out for 18 months. I went through your phone records, your calendar, everything I could get my hands on before Tyler locked me out. The last call you made was to someone at Cascade Financial Group at 5:30 that evening. Cascade Financial? I've never heard of them. Linda pulled a small notebook from her purse, its pages filled with her neat handwriting. They're a private investigation firm based in Portland. They specialize in financial fraud and corporate embezzlement cases. The call lasted 12 minutes. I stared at her, trying to process this information. Why would I have been calling a private investigation firm? I have a theory about that, but first I need to tell you about some things I discovered after your accident. Things about Tyler's business that didn't add up. Linda flipped through several pages of her notebook, stopping at a section marked with yellow sticky notes. Brooks and Associates was in serious financial trouble before your accident. Tyler had overextended on several development projects, and the company was carrying massive debt. How do you know all this? Because I'm an elementary school teacher who spent her summers working as a bookkeeper for Dad's construction company, remember? I know how to read financial statements, and I know what warning signs to look for. After your accident, Tyler suddenly had access to your life insurance policy, your retirement accounts, everything. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You think Tyler was having financial problems and saw my death as a solution? I think Tyler was desperate enough to consider options that most people would never contemplate. Your life insurance policy alone was worth $500,000. Combined with your retirement savings and your half of the house equity, your death would have solved all his financial problems and left him free to start over. I thought about Tyler's demeanor during our hospital room conversation. The way he'd seemed more concerned about the legal complications of my survival than overjoyed by my recovery. Tell me about Vanessa Kane. Linda's expression grew even grimmer. Vanessa appeared in Tyler's life about 3 months before your accident. She supposedly approached him about handling some legal work for her previous employer. But I could never verify that the company she claimed to work for actually existed. What do you mean? I called the law firm where she supposedly worked as a paralegal. They had no record of anyone named Vanessa Kane ever being employed there. When I tried to track down her educational background, I found a Vanessa Kane who graduated from Portland Community College with a certificate in office administration, but the photo on her student ID looked nothing like the woman who married Tyler. A chill ran down my spine. You think she's using a false identity? I think Vanessa Kane is very good at being whoever she needs to be to get what she wants. And what she wanted was Tyler's business and everything that came with it. Linda turned to another section of her notebook, this one filled with printed photographs. I started following them after Tyler banned me from visiting you. I know it sounds crazy, but I needed to understand what was really happening. She handed me a series of photos that showed Tyler and Vanessa at various locations around Cedar Falls. In some, they were having intimate dinners at expensive restaurants. In others, they were meeting with well-dressed men in parking lots and office buildings. But it was the final photo that made my blood run cold. This was taken 2 weeks before your accident, Linda said quietly. The image showed Tyler and Vanessa standing outside a small office building, clearly engaged in an intense conversation with a man in a dark suit. The sign above the door read, Cascade Financial Group. They were meeting with the same investigation firm I called? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It gets worse. I managed to get copies of Tyler's phone records from the months before your accident. He was in regular contact with someone at Cascade Financial starting about 6 weeks before that. Night. Linda pulled out another set of documents. These are credit card statements showing payments to Cascade Financial Group. Tyler was paying them for something, Amanda. The question is what? I stared at the evidence Linda had compiled, feeling sick to my stomach as the implications became clear. You think Tyler hired them to investigate me? I think Tyler hired them to help him plan the perfect accident. Think about it, Amanda. You leave the house that night upset about something, driving on a dark highway with no witnesses around. Your car goes off the road and hits a tree, but according to Dr. Martinez, your injuries don't match that type of accident. But why would Vanessa be involved? If Tyler was planning to kill me, why would he need her help? Linda's expression grew thoughtful. What if it wasn't Tyler's plan? What if Vanessa was the one pulling the strings all along? Before I could respond, my hospital room door opened and Dr. Martinez entered, followed by a man I didn't recognize. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd spent years dealing with difficult situations. Amanda, I'd like you to meet Detective Mike Thompson, Dr. Martinez said. He's been looking into some irregularities surrounding your accident case. Detective Thompson stepped forward, extending his hand. Ms. Brooks, I'm glad to see you're awake. I've been hoping to speak with you for quite some time. Linda immediately tensed beside me. Why is a detective here? I thought Amanda's accident was a closed case. It was, Detective Thompson said, settling into a second chair that Dr. Martinez had brought from the hallway. Until some new information came to light about 3 months ago that made us take another look at the circumstances. What kind of new information? I asked. Detective Thompson pulled out a small recording device and placed it on the rolling table beside my bed. I received an anonymous tip that led me to obtain a search warrant for Cascade Financial Group's offices. What we found there was very interesting. He pressed play on the device, and I heard voices that made my heart race with recognition. Tyler's voice, clear and unmistakable, talking to someone I assumed was Vanessa. The arrangement we discussed needs to happen soon. The financial pressure is getting worse, and Amanda's been asking questions about the missing funds from the business account. A woman's voice responded, sultry and confident. Everything is in place. The accident will look completely natural, and afterward, you'll have access to her life insurance and retirement accounts. Plus, with her out of the picture, there won't be anyone to challenge your control of the business. What about her sister? Linda's been suspicious about our relationship. Linda doesn't have any legal standing. Once Amanda is gone and we're married, any claims she makes will look like the desperate accusations of a grieving family member. The recording continued for several more minutes, detailing plans for my accident with clinical precision. They discussed the best location, the optimal timing, even backup plans if their initial attempt failed. What chilled me most was how casually they talked about ending my life, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. When the recording ended, the hospital room was silent except for the steady beeping of my heart monitor. Linda was crying quietly, her hand covering her mouth in horror. Dr. Martinez looked pale and shaken. Detective Thompson watched me carefully, waiting for my reaction. How did you get this recording? I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. It was part of a larger collection of files that Cascade Financial kept on their clients. Apparently, they routinely recorded planning sessions as insurance against their clients, trying to back out of agreements or betray them later. So Tyler and Vanessa hired this company to help them plan my murder. That's exactly what they did. Cascade Financial Group isn't just a private investigation firm. They're what you might call a problem-solving service for people who have problems that can't be solved through legal means. I absorbed this information, feeling strangely detached from the reality that my husband and his lover had conspired to kill me. What happened that night? Did they carry out their plan? Detective Thompson nodded grimly. Based on our investigation, we believe Vanessa forced your car off the road using a stolen vehicle. The impact was designed to look like you'd fallen, asleep at the wheel and crashed into the tree. But she miscalculated the force needed. Instead of killing you instantly, The accident left you in a coma. But Tyler acted like a grieving husband for months. Because the plan was always for him to appear devastated by your tragic death. He needed to maintain that performance until he could legally access your financial accounts and marry Vanessa without suspicion. Linda leaned forward, her voice shaking with rage. So they've been living off Amanda's money this entire time, thinking they'd gotten away with attempted murder. Not just living off it, Detective Thompson said. They've been very busy. Tyler used Amanda's life insurance payout to stabilize Brooks and Associates, and Vanessa has been systematically draining the company's accounts ever since they got married. I looked up sharply. What do you mean, draining the accounts? Detective Thompson smiled for the first time since entering the room. This is where the story gets interesting. You see, Vanessa Kane, or whatever her real name is, appears to be a professional con artist. We've found evidence linking her to similar schemes in 3 other states over the past decade. He pulled out a file folder and spread several photographs across my bedside table. Each showed the same woman I'd seen in Tyler's wedding announcement, but with different hair colors and styles, different clothing, different names on identification documents. In Nevada, she was Sarah Mitchell, married to a casino owner who died in a suspicious boating accident. In Arizona, she was Jennifer Walsh, widow of a successful contractor who suffered a fatal heart attack just 6 months after their wedding. In Colorado, she was Lisa Crawford, whose husband fell down a flight of stairs and broke his neck. She's a serial killer, Linda whispered. She's a black widow, Detective Thompson corrected. And Tyler was never meant to be her final target. He was just a convenient stepping stone to access the assets she really wanted. Which were what? Your family's trust fund. I stared at him blankly. What family trust fund? Detective Thompson looked confused. You don't know about the Walsh family trust? Linda suddenly went very still beside me. Oh my God, Amanda. I completely forgot with everything that's been happening. The trust from Great Aunt Meredith. What trust? I asked, feeling like I was missing crucial pieces of a puzzle. Great Aunt Meredith died about 2 years ago, Linda explained. She left a substantial trust fund that was split between us. But there were conditions. The money could only be accessed by beneficiaries who were married and over the age of 35. I'm 34. You'll be 35 next month. The trust was set up so that you'd gain access to your portion on your 35th birthday, provided you were still married. Detective Thompson nodded. The trust is worth approximately $2.7 million. Your portion would be $1.35 million. I felt the room spinning around me as the full scope of Vanessa's plan became clear. She wasn't just after Tyler's business and my life insurance. She was after the trust money. By marrying Tyler after your apparent death, she positioned herself to claim your inheritance as his widow. The trust documents have provisions for posthumous transfers to surviving spouses. But I'm not dead. No, you're not, which means that when you turn 35 next month, you'll have legal access to money that Vanessa has been counting on receiving. Money she's probably already borrowed against or committed to other ventures. Linda grabbed my hand. Amanda, this means you have leverage. You have something she wants desperately, and now that you're awake, she can't get it. Detective Thompson stood up, collecting his photographs and files. Ms. Brooks, I need to ask you to consider working with us on this case. With your testimony about the conversation you overheard before your accident, combined with the evidence we've gathered, we can put both Tyler and Vanessa away for attempted murder and conspiracy charges. What would I need to do? First, we need you to remember everything you can about that night. Any detail, no matter how small, could be crucial. Second, we'd like you to help us gather evidence about their current activities. You want me to spy on them. We want you to help us prove that they're continuing to commit crimes. Vanessa has been embezzling money from Tyler's business, and we believe she's planning to disappear with those funds as soon as she gains access to your trust money. I thought about Tyler's confident demeanor during our hospital conversation, the way he'd spoken about handling our situation fairly, for everyone involved. He had no idea that his new wife was planning to abandon him as soon as she got what she really wanted. "There's something else," Detective Thompson said. "Something that might help you decide whether to cooperate with our investigation." He handed me a final photograph, this one showing a young woman who looked strikingly similar to me. Same dark blonde hair, same general build, same facial structure. "This is Rebecca Martinez, Dr. Martinez's cousin. She disappeared in Nevada 3 years ago, shortly after the casino owner's death. Her body was never found, but her car was discovered at the bottom of Lake Tahoe." Dr. Martinez, who had been silent throughout most of the conversation, finally spoke up. "Rebecca was supposed to testify in the investigation of Sarah Mitchell, the woman we now know as Vanessa Kane. The day before she was scheduled to give her statement to police, she vanished." I stared at the photograph, seeing my own face reflected in Rebecca's features. "You think Vanessa targets women who look like her?" "We think Vanessa has a very specific type, and that she chooses her victims based on how easily she can assume their identities afterward. You, Rebecca, and the other women she's targeted all share similar physical characteristics." The implications of this revelation settled over me like a cold weight. I hadn't been chosen randomly as Tyler's wife, or even targeted specifically for my money. I'd been selected because I fit Vanessa's preferred victim profile, someone she could potentially replace if necessary. "I'll help you," I said quietly. "I want both of them to pay for what they've done." Detective Thompson nodded approvingly. "Good. We'll start by monitoring their activities and documenting any evidence of ongoing crimes. But first, you need to focus on your recovery and getting your strength back." After Detective Thompson and Dr. Martinez left, Linda and I sat in contemplative silence. The magnitude of what I'd learned was overwhelming, but beneath the shock and fear, I felt something else growing. Anger, yes, but also a fierce determination to reclaim my life and make sure that Tyler and Vanessa faced consequences for their actions. "Linda," I said finally, "I need you to help me with something. Anything. I need to get out of this hospital and back into my life without Tyler knowing I'm coming. I want to see what he and Vanessa have done to my home, my business, everything I worked for." Linda looked concerned. "Amanda, you've been unconscious for 18 months. You need time to recover, to rebuild your strength." "I've been recovering for 18 months. My body may be weak, but my mind is clear, and I need to start fighting back before they have time to cover their tracks or disappear with my money." What do you have in mind?" I thought about Tyler's reaction when I'd implied that I might have overheard conversations during my coma. The flash of fear in his eyes told me that he and Vanessa had secrets they couldn't afford to have exposed. "I'm going to give them exactly what they think they want," I said. "I'm going to let them believe I'm weak, confused, and grateful to be alive. I'm going to make them think I don't remember anything important about the night of my accident. And then I'm going to watch them make mistakes while I gather evidence of everything they've done." Tyler always underestimated me during our marriage. He thought I was too trusting, too naive to see through his manipulations. It's time to show him how wrong he was. Linda smiled for the first time since arriving at the hospital. "I like this plan. What do you need me to do?" "First, I need you to help me get discharged from the hospital as quickly as possible. Then I need you to take me somewhere Tyler won't think to look for me while I plan my next move. You can stay with me and the kids. Mark's been asking about you constantly, and Jake will be thrilled to see his favorite aunt." I felt a surge of affection for Linda's children, my nephew and niece who had grown 18 months older while I lay unconscious. "How are they handling all this?" "They've been worried about you, but kids are resilient. Mark's been saving drawings to show you when you woke up, and Jake has been practicing piano pieces he wanted to play for you." The thought of seeing my nephew and niece again, of reconnecting with the family I'd been torn away from, gave me strength. Tyler and Vanessa had stolen 18 months of my life, but they hadn't destroyed the relationships that truly mattered. "There's one more thing I need," I said. "I need to access my safety deposit box at First National Bank." "What's in there?" I smiled, remembering the precautions I'd taken during the final months of my marriage when Tyler's behavior had started to worry me. "Insurance." I may not have remembered the details of that night, but I apparently had enough sense to protect myself before everything went wrong. Linda raised an eyebrow. "What kind of insurance?" "The kind that's going to help us prove that Tyler and Vanessa aren't the only ones who know how to plan ahead." As visiting hours came to an end and Linda prepared to leave, I felt more hopeful than I had since waking up. Tyler and Vanessa thought they'd eliminated me as a threat to their plans. They had no idea that their biggest mistake wasn't failing to kill me in that car accident. Their biggest mistake was underestimating what I was capable of when I set my mind to getting justice. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of reclaiming my life and making sure that the people who'd tried to destroy me faced the consequences of their actions. Tyler wanted to handle our situation fairly for everyone involved. I was going to make sure he got exactly what he deserved. 3 days later, I signed my discharge papers with hands that shook only slightly from residual weakness. Not fear. Dr. Martinez had been reluctant to release me so quickly, but the physical therapy assessments showed that my motor functions were returning rapidly, and my cognitive tests revealed no lasting damage from the brain injury. What she didn't know was that I'd been pushing myself through extra exercises during the night shifts when the hospital was quiet, determined to regain my strength as quickly as possible. Linda arrived to pick me up wearing dark sunglasses and a baseball cap, looking more like she was planning a covert operation than a simple hospital pickup. She'd borrowed her neighbor's sedan instead of driving her own recognizable minivan, and she'd mapped out a route to her house that avoided the main roads where Tyler might spot us. "You look like you're enjoying this spy stuff a little too much," I told her as we walked toward the parking garage. "I've been watching too many crime shows while sitting with you at the hospital," she admitted with a grin. "But seriously, Amanda, we need to be careful. Tyler called me yesterday asking if I'd heard from you. He seemed nervous about something." I settled into the passenger seat, grateful to be moving under my own power for the first time in 18 months. The world outside looked both familiar and strange, like a place I'd visited in dreams but never quite experienced fully. Cedar Falls had continued existing without me. Buildings had been repainted, new businesses had opened, trees had grown taller, but the essential character of the town remained unchanged. "What did you tell him?" "That I hadn't heard anything," which was technically true at the time. But he kept pressing, asking if I thought you might try to contact me, whether I believed you were really as confused as you seemed during his visit. "He's worried I remember more than I'm letting on." "Good. Let him worry." Linda's house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac lined with mature oak trees and well-maintained family homes. Her front yard showed evidence of her children's activities: chalk, drawings on the driveway, a bicycle with colorful streamers abandoned near the porch steps, a soccer ball resting against the garage door. It was exactly the kind of normal, lived-in environment I needed to ground myself in reality. Mark and Jake burst through the front door before Linda had even turned off the engine, their faces bright with excitement and relief. At 10 and 7, they'd grown noticeably taller during my absence, but their enthusiastic hugs felt wonderfully familiar. Mark had inherited Linda's auburn hair and serious demeanor, while Jake shared my blonde coloring and animated personality. "Aunt Amanda, I saved all my drawings for you," Mark announced, pulling me toward the house. "Mom said you might not remember things, but I wanted to show you everything that happened while you were sleeping." Jake bounded alongside us, chattering about his piano lessons and the loose tooth he'd lost 2 months ago. Their uncomplicated joy at my return was healing in a way that medical care couldn't provide. These children had continued loving me and missing me throughout my absence, keeping space for me in their lives even when the adults around them had begun to move on. Linda's husband, Paul, greeted me with a warm hug and carefully controlled emotion. He was a steady, practical man who worked as an electrician and coached Little League baseball on weekends. During my marriage to Tyler, Paul had always treated me like a genuine sister-in-law rather than an obligation, and I could see in his eyes that my prolonged unconsciousness had affected him deeply. "We set up the guest room for you," he said, carrying my small bag of belongings from the hospital. "You can stay as long as you need. We're just glad to have you back." That first evening at Linda's house felt surreal and precious. We ordered pizza and watched animated movies with the kids, engaging in the kind of mundane family activities that I'd taken for granted before my accident. But beneath the surface normalcy, Linda and I were planning our next moves with careful precision. After Mark and Jake went to bed, the three adults sat around the kitchen table with Linda's notebook spread between us. Paul had been briefed on the basic details of Tyler and Vanessa's conspiracy, and his anger was visible in the tense set of his jaw and the way his hands curled into fists when Linda mentioned the recorded conversation. "So what's the plan?" Paul asked. "You can't just confront them directly. If they're willing to commit murder once, they might try again if they feel cornered." "Detective Thompson wants me to help gather evidence of their ongoing crimes," I said. "But first, I need to access my safety deposit box and see what condition they've left my finances in." Linda consulted her notebook. "I've been monitoring some of Tyler's business activities over the past few months. Brooks and Associates has been unusually active, closing deals and transferring properties at a pace that seems designed to convert assets into liquid cash quickly. Like they're preparing to disappear." "Exactly. And there's something else. Vanessa has been using your social security number to open new credit accounts. I found applications for credit cards and lines of credit that were submitted after your supposed death." Paul frowned. "Isn't that identity theft?" "It's worse than that," I said. "If she's been accumulating debt in my name while I was unconscious, I'm legally responsible for those obligations now that I'm alive again." Linda pulled out a stack of credit reports she'd obtained through her access to my financial information as my emergency contact. The documents painted a disturbing picture of systematic financial fraud. Vanessa had opened 7 different credit cards in my name, taken out a personal loan for $30,000, and even applied for a mortgage refinance on the house Tyler and I had shared. "The total debt she's accumulated in your name is approximately $85,000, Linda said. "All of it has been used to fund their lifestyle and Tyler's business operations." I studied the paperwork, feeling a familiar surge of the analytical clarity that had served me well during my career in nonprofit financial management. Before my marriage to Tyler, I'd been responsible for overseeing multi-million-dollar budgets and ensuring that charitable organizations operated within legal guidelines. Those skills were proving invaluable now as I assessed the scope of the financial crimes committed against me. "This is good," I said, surprising both Linda and Paul. "Good?" Paul looked at me like I'd suffered more brain damage than the doctors. Realized. Every fraudulent application, every illegal transaction, every credit account opened in my name while I was legally dead creates a paper trail that Detective Thompson can use to build his case. Vanessa has been so focused on accessing my money that she's created dozens of pieces of evidence proving her crimes. Linda smiled slowly as she understood my reasoning. "She's been so confident that you were permanently out of the picture that she didn't bother covering her tracks." "Exactly. And now I'm going to use her overconfidence against her." The next morning, Linda and I drove to First National Bank with a carefully rehearsed plan. I would access my safety deposit box while Linda created a distraction by conducting routine banking business at the main counter. If Tyler had been monitoring my accounts for any sign of activity, we wanted to minimize the chances that my visit would be immediately reported back to him. The bank manager, Mrs. Chen, recognized me despite my thinner appearance and shorter hair. Her double take was almost comical, and I could see her struggling to reconcile my presence with whatever she'd been told about my condition. "Ms. Brooks, this is quite unexpected. We were under the impression that you were still in a comatose state. I've recovered more quickly than anyone anticipated," I said, offering her a weak smile. "I'm still dealing with some memory issues and fatigue, but my doctors felt it was important for me to start handling some personal business." Mrs. Chen escorted me to the vault area, her professional composure masking obvious curiosity about my sudden appearance. The safety deposit box I'd rented 3 years earlier was in a section of the vault that provided some privacy from the main viewing area. When she left me alone with the box, I opened it with trembling fingers, hoping that my past self had been as thorough as I remembered. Inside, I found exactly what I'd hoped for: a comprehensive insurance policy against Tyler's increasingly suspicious behavior during the final months of our marriage. There were copies of financial documents showing discrepancies in Brooks and Associates' accounts, photographs of Tyler meeting with people I didn't recognize, and most importantly, a detailed letter I'd written to myself explaining my concerns and the steps I'd taken to protect my interests. The letter was dated 2 weeks before my accident, and reading it brought back memories that had been locked away by trauma and time. I remembered the growing unease I'd felt about Tyler's secretive phone calls, the way he'd started excluding me from business decisions that had previously been discussed openly. I'd been planning to confront him about my suspicions, but I'd wanted to gather evidence first to support my concerns. Among the documents was a copy of a private investigator's report detailing Tyler's financial dealings and personal relationships. The investigator, someone I'd hired independently, had uncovered evidence of Tyler's affair with Vanessa as well as irregularities in his business practices that suggested potential embezzlement from client accounts. Most significantly, I found a sealed envelope containing a detailed account of the argument Tyler and I had engaged in the night of my accident. Reading my own handwriting, I finally understood why I'd left the house that evening and where I'd been going when Vanessa forced my car off the road. According to my letter, I'd discovered that Tyler had been forging my signature on business documents and using my credentials to access client funds without authorization. When I confronted him about it that evening, he'd accused me of being paranoid and threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent if I continued making accusations against him. I'd been driving to meet with the private investigator to deliver additional evidence and discuss filing criminal charges against Tyler for fraud and embezzlement. The meeting was scheduled for 8 o'clock that evening at a coffee shop near the highway where my car was eventually found. The realization that I'd been actively investigating Tyler's crimes when Vanessa attempted to kill me added a new dimension to the conspiracy. They hadn't just been planning my death for financial gain, they'd been trying to eliminate me as a threat to their criminal enterprise. I photographed every document in the safety deposit box using my phone, then returned the originals to their secure location. If Tyler and Vanessa suspected that I had evidence against them, they might try to force me to retrieve it. But I wasn't ready to reveal the full extent of what I knew. When I rejoined Linda at the main counter, she was completing a legitimate transaction involving her children's college savings accounts. Her casual conversation with the teller provided perfect cover for my activities, and we left the bank without drawing any unusual attention. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Linda asked as we drove away. "More than I hoped for. I was smarter 18 months ago than I gave myself credit for." Back at Linda's house, I called Detective Thompson and arranged to meet him at a neutral location to share the evidence I'd recovered. We chose a small diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where two people could have a private conversation without attracting notice. Detective Thompson arrived wearing civilian clothes and carrying a worn leather briefcase that looked like it belonged to a traveling salesman rather than a police officer. His informal appearance was deliberate, designed to avoid drawing attention to our meeting. "Ms. Brooks, you look considerably stronger than you did a few days ago. I'm feeling more like myself, and I found some things that might help your investigation. I showed him the photographs I'd taken of the documents in my safety deposit box, explaining the context of each piece of evidence and how it connected to the larger pattern of Tyler and Vanessa's criminal activities. Detective Thompson studied the private investigator's report with particular interest. "This is excellent work. Your investigator documented several financial crimes that we hadn't been able to prove independently. What's the next step?" "We need to establish current evidence of ongoing criminal activity. The old evidence helps us understand their pattern of behavior, but we need fresh crimes to build a strong case for prosecution." He pulled out a small device that looked like a standard smartphone but was slightly thicker than normal models. "This is a recording device that looks and functions like a regular phone. If you're willing to wear it during interactions with Tyler and Vanessa, we can gather evidence of any admissions or threats they make." I took the device, testing its weight and functionality. "What kind of interactions are you hoping for?" "We want you to approach them as a confused, vulnerable accident victim who doesn't remember the details of that night. Let them think you're grateful to be alive and willing to accept whatever arrangements they've made during your absence. You want me to act weak and dependent. We want you to appear non-threatening while encouraging them to reveal information about their crimes. If they believe you're not a danger to them, they might be careless about what they say in your presence." I considered the risks of this approach. Tyler and Vanessa had already tried to kill me once, and they might view my survival as a threat that needed to be eliminated permanently. But I also understood that gathering evidence against them would require taking calculated risks. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow evening. We've learned that Tyler and Vanessa will be attending a charity fundraiser at the Cedar Falls Country Club. It's the kind of public event where you could approach them naturally, and the setting will provide some protection since they can't react violently in front of witnesses." Detective Thompson handed me an invitation to the fundraiser. "How did you get this?" "We have friends in the community who understand what's at stake. Dr. Martinez arranged for you to be added to the I.O. guest list as a last-minute addition." I examined the invitation, noting that the event was a benefit for the local children's hospital. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler and Vanessa would be attending a charity function while actively committing crimes against the community they pretended to serve. What if they refuse to talk to me? Then we'll find another approach. But based on their behavior patterns, I think they'll want to assess how much you remember and whether you pose a threat to their plans. And if they do pose a threat to me at this event? Detective Thompson's expression grew serious. "There will be undercover officers at the fundraiser, positioned throughout the venue. You'll never be alone with them, and help will be immediately available if the situation becomes dangerous." That evening, Linda helped me select an outfit that would convey the right impression for the following night's operation. We chose a simple black dress that was elegant but not attention-grabbing, along with minimal jewelry and makeup that emphasized my pale, recently recovered appearance. "You need to look like someone who's been through a traumatic experience, but is trying to rejoin society," Linda said, studying my reflection in her bedroom mirror. "I am someone who's been through a traumatic experience." "Yes, but you're also someone who's planning to bring down the people who tried to kill you. The trick is only showing them the vulnerable side." As I practiced the role I would need to play, I thought about the 18 months I'd lost and the life that Tyler and Vanessa had built on the foundation of my supposed death. Tomorrow night, I would begin the process of dismantling their carefully constructed lies and ensuring that they faced consequences for their crimes. Tyler had always underestimated my intelligence and determination during our marriage, treating me like a decorative accessory rather than an equal partner. Vanessa had chosen me as a victim because she believed I fit the profile of someone who could be easily eliminated and replaced. They were both about to discover how wrong they'd been about Amanda Walsh Brooks. The woman who woke up from that coma was not the same person who'd been driven off the road 18 months ago. I'd been forged by trauma and loss into something harder and more determined than either of them could have anticipated. The charity fundraiser would be my debut performance in this new role. But it was only the beginning of a much larger plan to reclaim my life and ensure that justice was served. The Cedar Falls Country Club sparkled with understated elegance on the night of the Children's Hospital fundraiser. String lights draped between towering pine trees created a warm ambiance across the outdoor terrace, while inside the main ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast soft light over round tables adorned with white linens and centerpieces of local wildflowers. The event drew the town's most prominent citizens, business leaders, and philanthropists, all gathered to support a worthy cause while enjoying an evening of refined socializing. I arrived 30 minutes after the official start timing my entrance to ensure that Tyler and Vanessa would already be settled into the evening's rhythm. Linda had dropped me off at the main entrance, squeezing my hand before I stepped out of the car. "Remember, you're fragile but grateful," she'd whispered. "Let them think they're in control." The recording device Detective Thompson had given me was tucked securely into my purse, its activation button easily accessible through the side pocket. 3 undercover officers were positioned throughout the venue, identified to me only by subtle signals. A man in a navy suit adjusting his tie near the bar, a woman in burgundy at the silent auction table, and a server with a small pin on his lapel shaped like a crescent moon. As I entered the ballroom, conversations quieted and heads turned. Word of my awakening had spread through Cedar Falls social circles with the speed that only small-town gossip could achieve, but seeing me in person clearly shocked many attendees who had accepted my death as established fact. I moved slowly through the crowd, accepting condolences and expressing gratitude for the support people claimed to have provided during my illness. Margaret Hendricks, the country club president, approached me with tears in her eyes and hands outstretched. "Amanda, dear, we're all so amazed by your recovery. Tyler told us the doctors had given up hope months ago." "The human spirit is remarkably resilient," I replied softly, allowing just enough tremor in my voice to suggest ongoing fragility. "I'm still adjusting to everything that's changed while I was away." "Of course, dear. It must be overwhelming to wake up and find that life has moved forward without you." Her words carried an unintentional sting, but I maintained my composed expression. "Tyler has been wonderful about helping me understand everything that's happened. I'm just grateful to be here tonight, supporting such an important cause." I spotted Tyler across the room before he noticed me. He stood near the dance floor with Vanessa at his side, both dressed impeccably and engaged in animated conversation with Dr. Stevens, the Children's Hospital administrator. Tyler wore a charcoal gray suit that I recognized as one I'd helped him select for business functions, while Vanessa looked stunning in a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Vanessa Kane was even more beautiful in person than she'd appeared in photographs. Her dark hair was styled in an elegant updo that showcased diamond earrings, and her figure was perfectly proportioned in a way that suggested either excellent genetics or expensive personal training. She moved with the confidence of a woman accustomed to being the most attractive person in any room, her smile bright and engaging as she charmed the hospital administrator. I moved closer to their group, weaving through other conversations and accepting brief expressions of surprise and support from acquaintances. When I was close enough to hear their voices, I activated the recording device and positioned myself near a tall floral arrangement that provided partial concealment while keeping them within earshot. "The new pediatric wing will be a tremendous asset to our community," Vanessa was saying, her voice warm with apparent sincerity. "Tyler and I are committed to supporting projects that improve life for local families." Dr. Stevens beamed at them both. "Your contribution has been incredibly generous, especially given the personal challenges you've faced recently." Tyler's expression grew appropriately somber. "We've learned not to take anything for granted. Life can change in an instant, and it's important to give back while we're able to do so." I found their performance fascinating and revolting in equal measure. They spoke about tragedy and loss with practiced emotion while standing in the midst. of luxury purchased with money stolen from their supposed victim. Vanessa's reference to their contribution caught my attention particularly, since I suspected that their generosity was being funded by my own embezzled assets. "Amanda, is that really you?" Dr. Stevens had spotted me hovering near the floral display, his voice carrying enough volume to draw Tyler and Vanessa's immediate attention. I watched Tyler's face transform as he realized I was present, his practiced charm faltering momentarily before reasserting itself. "Amanda!" Tyler stepped forward with arms outstretched, embracing me in what appeared to be a spontaneous gesture of joy and relief. To observing guests, his reaction looked perfectly appropriate for a man reunited with his miraculously recovered wife. Only I could feel the tension in his muscles and hear the slight strain in his voice as he whispered against my ear. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to support the hospital," I replied at normal volume, ensuring that our conversation could be overheard by nearby guests. "The medical staff there saved my life." This seemed like a meaningful way to express my gratitude. Vanessa approached us with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Up close, I could see that she was studying my appearance carefully, assessing my physical condition and mental state with the calculating gaze of a predator evaluating potential prey. "Amanda, I've heard so much about you," she said, extending her hand with apparent warmth. "I'm Vanessa Kane, Tyler's wife." The directness of her introduction was clearly intended to establish dominance and gauge my reaction to their marriage. I took her hand, noting that her grip was firm and her skin soft, suggesting a life of comfort and professional manicures. "It's lovely to meet you, Vanessa. Tyler mentioned that you've been a tremendous source of support during this difficult time." "We've all had to adapt to challenging circumstances," she replied diplomatically. "But tonight is about celebration and community support, not dwelling on past difficulties." Dr. Stevens, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, continued his enthusiastic discussion of the hospital's expansion plans. "Amanda, you should be proud to know that your husband and Vanessa have been among our most generous supporters. Their contribution will help fund the new trauma wing." "That's wonderful," I said, looking directly at Tyler. "I'm sure the money will be put to excellent use helping people recover from unexpected accidents." Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at my choice of words, but he maintained his pleasant expression. "The hospital staff performed miracles. With your care, Amanda, supporting their work feels like the least we can do. Especially considering how much we've all gained from modern medical intervention," Vanessa added smoothly. "Tyler's business has thrived even during the most challenging period of his personal life. Success creates an obligation to share that good fortune with others." I wondered if she realized how revealing her comment was. Any genuinely caring spouse would focus on the emotional aspects of Tyler's supposed loss, not the financial benefits that had resulted from my absence. "Business has been good then?" I asked Tyler directly. "I'm sorry. I'm still catching up on everything that's happened while I was unconscious. The doctors say my memory may take time to fully return." "Brooks and Associates has expanded significantly," Tyler replied carefully. "We've acquired several new properties and taken on larger development projects." "How exciting." "I remember you always wanted to grow the company beyond Cedar Falls. Have you been able to explore opportunities in other markets?" Vanessa and Tyler exchanged a quick glance that most observers would miss, but I caught the subtle communication between them. My questions about business expansion had touched on something they preferred not to discuss publicly. "We've been exploring various possibilities," Vanessa said, smoothly redirecting the conversation. "But tonight, let's focus on the wonderful cause we're all here to support." Dr. Stevens seized the opportunity to elaborate on the hospital's fundraising goals, giving Tyler and Vanessa a chance to compose themselves while I listened with appropriate interest. During this lull, I noticed James Brooks, Tyler's business partner, approaching our group with his wife Carol trailing behind him. James had always been the operational backbone of Brooks and Associates, while Tyler handled client relations and public representation. During my marriage, I'd observed that James possessed a detailed understanding of every transaction and contract the company handled, making him either a valuable ally in Tyler's criminal enterprises or a potential witness to illegal activities. "Amanda, what a wonderful surprise," James said, his greeting warm but his eyes troubled. "Tyler told me about your remarkable recovery, but seeing you here tonight is truly amazing." Carol embraced me gently, her expression conflicted in a way that suggested she had complicated feelings about my return. "We've all been praying for you, dear. Tyler has been so dedicated to your care." "I've been incredibly blessed," I replied, watching James's reaction carefully. "I understand the business has been doing well despite everything. That must be a relief during such a challenging time." James nodded, but I caught him glancing at Tyler with what appeared to be concern. "We've been fortunate to maintain stability and growth. Tyler's leadership has been invaluable." "James has been essential to our success," Tyler said quickly. "His expertise has allowed us to take advantage of opportunities that might have been overwhelming otherwise." Something in the way Tyler emphasized James's importance suggested tension between the business partners. I filed this observation away for future investigation, sensing that James might be a weak link in Tyler and Vanessa's criminal conspiracy. The dinner announcement interrupted our conversation, and guests began moving toward their assigned tables. I had deliberately arrived without confirming my seating arrangement, forcing Tyler and Vanessa to decide how to handle my unexpected presence. "Amanda, I'm not sure where you're seated," Tyler said, consulting the table cards he'd retrieved from the reception table. "Let me check with the event coordinator." "Oh, don't worry about it," I replied with studied casualness. "I'm sure there's room at your table. I'd love to catch up on everything I've missed." Vanessa's smile became noticeably more strained. "Of course, I'm sure we can arrange something." The table Tyler and Vanessa shared with James and Carol, Dr. Stevens and his wife, and two other couples connected to Tyler's business, was positioned prominently near the front of the ballroom. An additional chair was quickly added for me, placing me directly across from Vanessa and in perfect position to observe both her and Tyler throughout the meal. Dinner conversation began with safe topics: the quality of the food, appreciation for the event organizers, and general discussion of the hospital's expansion plans. But as wine flowed and the evening progressed, the talk became more personal and revealing. "Amanda, you must be curious about how Tyler managed during your illness," suggested Mrs. Peterson, one of the other wives at the table. "He was so devoted, visiting you constantly and refusing to give up hope even when the doctors were pessimistic." Tyler looked uncomfortable with this characterization of his behavior, while Vanessa's expression suggested she found the conversation tedious. I seized the opportunity to probe for more specific information. "I'm still piecing together the timeline of everything," I said, directing my comment toward Tyler. "When did you and Vanessa meet? I know she helped you through the legal aspects of my situation." "We met about 8 months ago," Vanessa answered before Tyler could respond. "I was working with a law firm that specializes in medical and estate planning issues. Tyler needed guidance navigating the complexities of your care and the legal implications of your condition. 8 months ago would place their first meeting well before Tyler had me declared dead, which contradicted their earlier claims about the development of their relationship. I mentally noted this discrepancy while maintaining an expression of innocent curiosity. That must have been such a difficult time for you, Tyler, making those kinds of decisions about someone you love. It was the hardest thing I've ever faced, Tyler replied, his voice carrying what sounded like genuine emotion. Having to accept that you might never wake up, planning for a future that didn't include you. Vanessa's support was invaluable during that period. We found comfort in each other during a very dark time, Vanessa added, reaching across the table to touch Tyler's hand. Neither of us was looking for a relationship, But sometimes life brings people together when they most need support. James cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should focus on more cheerful topics. Amanda's recovery is cause for celebration, not dwelling on painful memories. But I wasn't ready to abandon this line of inquiry. Of course, James. I'm just trying to understand everything that happened while I was away. It's disorienting to wake up and find that so much has changed. What kind of changes are you finding most difficult to adjust to? Dr. Stevens asked with professional interest. Financial matters mostly. I'm still learning about the arrangements that were made during my incapacity. I suppose Tyler had to make numerous decisions about our accounts and assets. Tyler's fork clattered against his plate as he set it down abruptly. Amanda, this probably isn't the appropriate setting to discuss personal business matters. You're absolutely right, I agreed quickly. I apologize for bringing up such private concerns. It's just that everything feels so unfamiliar, and I'm grateful to have people who can help me understand what I've missed. Vanessa was studying me with increased intensity, clearly trying to determine whether my questions represented genuine confusion or calculated investigation. Memory issues must be very frustrating, she said sympathetically. Have your doctors provided any guidance about what you might expect in terms of recovery? They're optimistic that most of my cognitive function will return completely. Some specific memories may never come back, but overall, they expect me to regain full mental capacity. I watched both Tyler and Vanessa carefully as I delivered this information, noting the subtle tightening around Tyler's eyes and the way Vanessa's smile became slightly more forced. The possibility that I might recover memories of the night of my accident clearly concerned them. That's wonderful news, James said with apparent sincerity. It will be good to have you back to your old self. Actually, I'm not sure I want to be exactly my old self, I replied thoughtfully. This experience has taught me not to take anything for granted. I think I want to be more involved in important decisions going forward, rather than trusting others to handle everything for me. The implication that I intended to take a more active role in managing my affairs hung in the air, like a challenge. Tyler's jaw tightened visibly, while Vanessa's fingers drummed silently against her wine glass. Independence is certainly admirable, Vanessa said carefully, but you've been through significant trauma. It might be wise to ease back into complex responsibilities gradually. I appreciate your concern, but I feel remarkably clear-headed. In fact, I've been thinking about resuming some of my nonprofit work. There's something energizing about the idea of helping people who are facing their own challenges. Tyler leaned forward slightly. Amanda, you should focus on your own recovery before taking on additional responsibilities. There's no rush to dive back into demanding work. Maybe not, but I've always found purpose in helping others, and after everything the medical staff did for me, I feel an obligation to give back to the community that supported me. Speaking of giving back, Dr. Stevens interjected, have you given any thought to sharing your recovery story? It could provide hope for other families dealing with similar situations. That's an interesting idea. I think people would be fascinated to hear about everything that happened during my unconsciousness. The business decisions that were made, the legal arrangements, the personal relationships that developed. It's quite a remarkable story when you consider all the details. My comment was deliberately ambiguous, but Tyler and Vanessa both understood the underlying threat. I was suggesting that I might make my story public, potentially exposing their activities to scrutiny. Recovery stories can be inspiring, Vanessa said diplomatically, but they can also be quite personal. Some experiences are better kept private, out of respect for everyone involved. True, but I believe in transparency and accountability. People deserve to understand what really happened, especially when public figures are involved. The rest of dinner passed with increasingly strained conversation, as Tyler and Vanessa struggled to maintain their composure while processing the implications of my presence and comments. I continued to play the role of a confused but grateful accident victim, asking innocent questions that carried subtle threats. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Tyler approached me near the coat check area. "Amanda, we need to talk privately. There are things you need to understand about the current situation." "Of course. I have questions too. There are some gaps in my understanding that I'd like to fill in." "Not here. Can you come to the house tomorrow evening? There are documents and explanations that might help clarify things for you." I pretended to consider his invitation carefully. "I think that would be helpful. What time works for you?" 7 o'clock. And Amanda, it would be better if this conversation remained between us for now, until you have a complete picture of everything that's happened. I understand completely. As I waited for Linda to pick me up, I reflected on the evening's revelations. Tyler and Vanessa had revealed several pieces of information that contradicted their previous statements, and their discomfort with my questions suggested they were hiding much more than I'd initially suspected. Most importantly, Tyler's invitation to visit the house provided an opportunity to gather evidence in the location where they felt most secure. Tomorrow evening's conversation would either provide the proof Detective Thompson needed to arrest them, or it would force them to make their next move in the deadly game we were all playing. Either way, I was ready for whatever came next. The house I'd shared with Tyler for 6 years looked different under the pale autumn evening light. Vanessa had changed the exterior paint from warm cream to stark white, and the garden I'd carefully cultivated had been replaced with geometric landscaping that prioritized appearance over life. Even the front door had been painted black instead of the welcoming blue I'd chosen when we first moved in. I sat in Linda's car for a moment, steeling myself for what lay ahead. Detective Thompson and his team were positioned strategically around the neighborhood, ready to respond if the situation became dangerous. The recording device in my purse was activated, and a backup transmitter had been sewn into the lining of my jacket. "You don't have to do this," Linda said for the 3rd time. "There has to be another way to get the evidence you need. This is the way that ensures they can't hurt anyone else. Tonight, we end this." I walked up the familiar pathway, noting that even the doorbell had been changed. When Tyler opened the door, I was struck by how much older he looked than he had just the night before. His confident facade from the charity event had been replaced by obvious stress, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. "Thank you for coming," he said, stepping aside to let me enter. "Vanessa is in the living room." The interior of the house was almost unrecognizable. My carefully chosen furniture had been replaced with sleek, modern pieces that looked expensive but cold. The family photos that had lined the mantelpiece were gone, replaced by abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. It was as if every trace of my existence had been systematically erased and replaced with Vanessa's vision of sophistication. Vanessa stood near the fireplace wearing a silk blouse and designer jeans, her hair pulled back in a casual style that somehow looked effortlessly perfect. She held a glass of red wine and gestured toward a bottle on the coffee table. "Would you like some wine, Amanda? It's a lovely Cabernet from a vineyard Tyler and I visited last month." "No, thank you. I'm still being careful about alcohol while my system recovers." I settled into one of the new chairs, deliberately choosing the seat that would give me the best view of both their faces while keeping my back to a solid wall. The skills I'd developed during my nonprofit career, reading donors and board members for signs of deception, served me well in this much deadlier negotiation. "So," Tyler began, settling onto the couch beside Vanessa, "I think we need to address the elephant in the room." "Which elephant would that be?" I asked with manufactured innocence. "Your questions last night made it clear that you're confused about the legal and financial arrangements that were necessary during your incapacity. I want to explain everything so there are no misunderstandings." Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "We understand this must be overwhelming, Amanda. Waking up to find that your entire life has been restructured while you were unconscious, but everything that was done was handled according to legal requirements. I'm sure it was. Could you walk me through the timeline? I'm still having trouble organizing my memories chronologically. Tyler glanced at Vanessa before beginning. After your accident, the doctors initially said your chances of recovery were good. But as months passed without improvement, they became more pessimistic. After a year with no sign of consciousness, they recommended that we consider long-term care options. And that's when you had me declared legally dead? That's when the court determined that your condition met the legal criteria for presumptive death, Vanessa corrected smoothly. It's a standard procedure when someone has been unresponsive for an extended period with no medical hope of recovery. I see. And when did your relationship begin? Tyler and Vanessa exchanged another look. We met when I was helping Tyler navigate the legal complexities of your situation, Vanessa said. Our relationship developed gradually over several months as we worked together and supported each other through a difficult time. How romantic. And the marriage? We married 6 months ago, Tyler said. It felt important to formalize our commitment and create stability during an uncertain period. I nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. And the house? I notice you've made quite a few changes. We thought it would be healthier to create a new environment rather than living surrounded by reminders of tragedy, Vanessa explained. Tyler needed to move forward with his life. Of course. What about my personal belongings? Family photos, jewelry, things with sentimental value? Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Everything important is in storage. We weren't sure what you'd want when? If you recovered. But you were sure I wouldn't recover. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had me declared dead. The medical evidence suggested recovery was extremely unlikely, Vanessa said carefully. We had to make decisions, based on the information available at the time. I stood and walked to the mantelpiece, studying the expensive art that had replaced my family photographs. These are beautiful pieces. They must have been quite expensive. Vanessa has excellent taste, Tyler said proudly. She's transformed this place into something really special. I'm sure the interior design was costly. How have you been managing financially? I know the business was struggling before my accident. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Tyler's jaw tightened, and Vanessa's fingers clenched around her wine glass. Brooks and Associates has been more successful than ever, Tyler said defensively. We've expanded our operations and taken on larger projects. That's wonderful. I remember you were having cash flow problems before my accident. Something about overextending on development projects? Those issues were resolved, Vanessa said quickly. Tyler's business acumen combined with some strategic financial management turned things around completely. Strategic financial management. That's an interesting way to put it. I turned back to face them, noting the tension in both their postures. I've been thinking about resuming my involvement in financial oversight. Maybe I could help with the business books like I used to. That's not necessary, Tyler said immediately. Vanessa handles all the financial management now. She's much more qualified than you were. The insult was clearly intentional, designed to provoke an emotional reaction. Instead, I smiled pleasantly. I'm sure she is. What's your background in financial management, Vanessa? I have extensive experience in corporate accounting and business operations, she replied smoothly. Which companies did you work for previously? I'd love to learn from someone with your expertise. Vanessa's pause lasted a fraction too long. I've worked with several firms over the years. Most recently with a consulting group in Portland that specializes in business turnarounds. How fascinating! What was the name of the consulting group? I don't think the specific details of Vanessa's resume are relevant to this conversation, Tyler interrupted. We're here to discuss your situation, not conduct a job interview. You're absolutely right. I apologize for my curiosity. I returned. to my chair, noting that both Tyler and Vanessa looked relieved to escape my questions about Vanessa's background. Let's talk about my situation. Specifically, what happens now that I'm alive again? Tyler and Vanessa exchanged yet another meaningful look. That's complicated, Tyler admitted. Legally, our marriage is valid because you were declared dead, but your recovery creates some unusual circumstances, such as, well, technically, you're still legally dead until the court reverses that declaration, which means you don't currently have access to bank accounts, credit cards, or other financial instruments. But I do have access to things that predate the death certificate, don't I? Like safety deposit boxes that were established before my accident? Tyler's face went completely pale. Why would you ask about safety deposit boxes? Because I remember having one, though I'm not sure what I kept in it. I was thinking I should check to see if there's anything important there. Vanessa set down her wine glass with enough force to make it ring against the table. Amanda, I think we need to be completely honest with you about something. Please do. Your memory problems may be more extensive than you realize. There are things you think you remember that didn't actually happen the way you believe they did. I tilted my head curiously. What kind of things? For instance, you seemed to think you had concerns about Tyler's business practices before your accident. But the truth is, you were dealing with some mental health issues that were affecting your perception of reality. Mental health issues? Tyler leaned forward, his expression taking on a patronizing tone I remembered from our marriage. Amanda, you were becoming increasingly paranoid and suspicious in the months before your accident. You accused me of having affairs, of stealing money, of lying to you about business matters. None of it was true. That must have been very difficult for you. It was heartbreaking, Tyler continued. You refused to seek professional help, and your accusations were becoming more elaborate and bizarre. The night of your accident, you stormed out of the house in a rage, claiming you were going to expose my supposed crimes to the authorities. But instead, I had an accident. Yes. And in a way, it was almost a relief because you were clearly heading toward a complete mental breakdown. I absorbed this revision of history with growing amazement at their audacity. So you're saying I was mentally ill, not investigating actual crimes? We're saying you weren't thinking clearly, Vanessa said gently. And it's possible that your brain injury has reinforced some of those false memories, making them seem more real than they actually were. That's a terrifying thought. How can I tell the difference between real memories and false ones? That's why it's so important for you to trust the people who care about you, Tyler said. Vanessa and I understand what really happened. We can help you separate fact from fiction. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the backyard where my garden used to bloom. This is very confusing. I have these vivid memories of discovering financial discrepancies, of hiring a private investigator, of finding evidence that you were stealing from client accounts. The silence behind me was deafening. When I turned around, both Tyler and Vanessa looked like they'd been carved from stone. You hired a private investigator? Vanessa asked, her voice carefully controlled. I think so. But if you're right, about my mental state, maybe that's just another false memory. Tyler stood and moved toward me. Amanda, what exactly do you think you remember about this supposed investigation? It's all very hazy. Something about meeting with someone that night, delivering evidence of financial crimes. But you're probably right that it was all part of my paranoid delusions. Where were you supposed to meet this person? Vanessa demanded, dropping all pretense of gentle concern. I'm not sure. Somewhere near the highway where my accident happened, I think. But again, if none of it was real. Tyler and Vanessa looked at each other with expressions of barely controlled panic. I could see them calculating, trying to determine how much I actually knew versus how much I was guessing. Amanda, Tyler said slowly, did you keep any documentation of these supposed investigations? I don't think so. Where would I have hidden something like that? A safety deposit box would be a logical place, Vanessa said, her voice sharp with urgency. But you just told me that my memories of having a safety deposit box might be false too. We're just trying to help you sort through what's real and what isn't, Tyler said. If you think you remember having important documents, we should investigate that together. That's very kind of you. Should we go to the bank right now? The bank is closed, Vanessa pointed out. But we could go first thing tomorrow morning. Perfect. I'll meet you there at 9 o'clock. Tyler moved closer to me, his expression intense. Amanda, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Have you spoken to anyone else about these memories? Your sister, the police? Anyone? Just Dr. Martinez. She's been asking me questions about what I remember from before the accident. What did you tell her? The same things I've told you. That I have confused memories of investigating financial crimes, but I'm not sure what's real. Vanessa joined Tyler near the window, effectively boxing me in. Amanda, it's very important that you don't share these confused memories with anyone else until we can help you sort through them properly. Why? Because if you start spreading false accusations again, it could damage innocent people's reputations. Tyler's business, our marriage, the respect we've built in the community. I understand. I certainly don't want to hurt anyone with false accusations. Good, Tyler said, relaxing slightly. We'll go to the bank together tomorrow and clear up any confusion about safety deposit boxes or hidden documents. I nodded, agreeably. That sounds like a perfect plan. I should probably get going now. Linda is expecting me back. Of course, Vanessa said. Thank you for being so understanding about everything, Amanda. I know this situation is complicated for all of us. As Tyler walked me to the door, I could feel both of them watching my every movement, analyzing every word I'd spoken for hidden meanings or threats. Amanda, Tyler said as I reached for the door handle, I want you to know that despite everything that's happened, I do care about your well-being. We both do. I appreciate that, Tyler. I know none of this has been easy for anyone. I walked to Linda's car with measured steps, resisting the urge to run despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. As we drove away, I could see Tyler and Vanessa silhouetted in the living room window, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. How did it go? Linda asked. They're planning to kill me tomorrow morning at the bank, I said matter-of-factly. What? They think I have evidence hidden in a safety deposit box that could expose their crimes. They're going to accompany me to the bank tomorrow morning, ostensibly to help me sort through my confused memories. And then? And then they're going to make sure I have another accident before I can access whatever evidence they think I've hidden. Linda pulled over to the side of the road, her hands shaking. Amanda, we have to call Detective Thompson right now. I already did. He's been listening to everything through the transmitter. By tomorrow morning, Tyler and Vanessa will be in custody, and I'll finally have my life back. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Pacific Northwest weather that seemed appropriate for the conclusion of such a dark chapter. Detective Thompson called at 7 a.m. to confirm that arrests had been made without incident. They're both in custody, he reported. Tyler for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, and embezzlement. Vanessa for the same charges plus identity theft and suspected involvement in multiple murders across 3 states. What happens now? Now you get to reclaim your life. The death certificate will be reversed, your financial accounts will be restored, and you'll be able to move forward knowing that the people who tried to destroy you are facing justice. 3 months later, I stood in the garden behind my restored house, planting spring bulbs that would bloom when the worst of winter had passed. The legal proceedings had moved swiftly once Tyler and Vanessa realized the weight of evidence against them. Tyler had accepted a plea bargain that would keep him in prison for the next 15 years, while Vanessa faced life in prison for multiple counts of murder and attempted murder. Linda approached from the house carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who had fought a long battle and won. "The insurance company called," she said, settling onto the garden bench I'd recently restored. "They're processing your life insurance claim reversal and should have a check for you within the week." "Good. I want to establish a foundation to help other families dealing with suspicious accidents and insurance fraud." "That seems fitting." I continued planting bulbs, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. 18 months of unconsciousness had cost me dearly, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, the importance of family, and the necessity of fighting for justice even when the odds seemed impossible. "Any regrets?" Linda asked. I considered the question seriously. About Tyler and Vanessa facing consequences for their crimes? None. About losing 18 months of my life? Every day. But I'm alive, I'm free, and I have the chance to build something better from what's left. And the foundation? The Rebecca Martinez Foundation for Victim Advocacy. Dr. Martinez wants to help establish it in memory of her cousin. Linda smiled. Rebecca would have liked that. As the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the garden, where new life was taking root, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed. Tyler and Vanessa had tried to erase me from existence, but they had failed to understand the most important truth about survival. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from the determination to rise again after everything has been taken away. My story wasn't just about justice or revenge. It was about reclaiming identity, rebuilding trust, and proving that even the most carefully planned crimes can be undone by courage, intelligence, and the unwavering support of people who refuse to give up on those they love. The bulbs I planted that day would bloom in spring, a reminder that life finds a way to regenerate and flourish even after the harshest winter. And like those flowers, I had emerged from my own dark season stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to make the most of the second chance I'd been given. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.